Glycolysis is a process where glucose is break down into two molecules of pyruvate. Glucose is 6 carbon. It breaks down into 3 carbon pyruvate molecules. It is also known as EMP pathway, and oxygen is not required for this process. Glycolysis takes place in cytoplasm of cell. ATPs are obtained from glycolysis. Brain is highly dependent on glycolysis for its energy requirements. Glycolysis is divided into two phases. First is preparatory phase and second is payoff phase. So here there are 5 steps which are involved in preparatory phase. In first step, glucose is converted into glucose 6-phosphate by action of enzyme hexokinase. In this process, one ATP is converted into ADP, and that phosphate group from ATP is attached to glucose, and glucose is converted into glucose 6-phosphate. Enzyme hexokinase is involved in transfer of phosphate group. In next step, glucose 6-phosphate is converted into fructose 6-phosphate by action of enzyme phosphoglucose isomerase. Fructose 6-phosphate is converted into fructose 1,6-bisphosphate by action of enzyme phosphofructokinase. Here one ATP is converted into ADP, and in next step fructose 1,6-bisphosphate is break down into two 3 carbon compounds by action of enzyme aldolase. Here one glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and dihydroxyacetone phosphate is formed. In this process, dihydroxyacetone phosphate is converted into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate by the process of isomerization. This is known as preparatory phase as two ATPs are converted into ADP. Hence, energy is consumed in this process. In next steps we will see payoff phase. So this is payoff phase. In this process, ATPs are formed, hence it is known as payoff phase. In this process, glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate is converted into 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate by action of enzyme glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase. In this process, one NAD plus is converted into NADH plus H plus. Hence, hydrogen is removed from substrate, is accepted by NAD plus to form NADH. 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate is converted into 3-phosphoglycerate by action of enzyme phosphoglycerate kinase. In this process, ADP is converted into ATP. Then 3-phosphoglycerate is converted into 2-phosphoglycerate by action of enzyme phosphoglycerate mutase. Then 2-phosphoglycerate is converted into phosphoenol pyruvate by removal of water and action of enzyme enolase. Then phosphoenol pyruvate is finally converted into pyruvate by enzyme pyruvate kinase. In this process, ADP is converted into ATP. You can see here two ATPs are formed and one NADH is formed in this process. So one NADH gives 3 ATPs. Total 5 ATPs are formed and 2 ATPs are consumed in preparatory phase. Hence, we get total 3 ATPs from glycolysis. So net yield is of 3 ATPs. We know that two molecules of pyruvate are formed from one glucose. If net yield is 3 ATPs, then from one glucose total we get 6 ATP molecules in glycolysis. In step 1, glucose is converted into glucose 6-phosphate by action of enzyme hexokinase. Here, phosphate group is attached to 6 carbon of glucose. Hence, final product is known as glucose 6-phosphate. In step 2, isomerization reaction takes place by action of enzyme isomerase. Here, glucose 6-phosphate is isomerized to fructose 6-phosphate. fructose 6 phosphate is then converted into fructose 1,6 bisphosphate. Here again one of the ATP is converted into ADP. Here, breakdown of fructose 1,6 bisphosphate into two 3 carbon compounds. One is glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate and second is dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Dihydroxyacetone phosphate is converted into glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate by isomerization. Glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate is converted into 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate by action of enzyme dehydrogenase. Here, hydrogen is accepted by NAD plus and it is converted into NADH. This NADH then enters the electron transport chain to give 3 ATPs. 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate is converted into 3-phosphoglycerate by action of enzyme kinase and here 1 ATP is formed. 3-phosphoglycerate is then converted into 2-phosphoglycerate by action of enzyme mutase and that 2-phosphoglycerate is then converted into phosphoenol pyruvate and in last step phosphoenol pyruvate is converted into pyruvate by yielding 1 ATP. Thank you.